Hello, good morning, good evening, good night, whatever time you're going to listen to this podcast to. Welcome back to the Neighborhood Conversations where we chat about realistic strategies by inviting inclusive individuals, inclusive leaders, I would say, onto the podcast to talk about a variety of different topics. Today we're going to be talking about the deaf and hard hearing community, but also learning more different ways of advocacy and topics that you may not know, and just sharing different information to go into the community. In the neighborhood conversations, we love to go into communities and in the neighborhood just to have a conversation. So we're happy to be in your neighborhood today, whether you're driving on a in your car, whether you're on transit trying to get somewhere, we're just happy just to be in your presence for the next few minutes. My name is Temple Soy. I am your host, and it's a pleasure to have two amazing guests today. We have the amazing Mary Josie Crawford. Also known as MJ. She's an amazing case manager here supporting our deaf clients. And MJ, thank you so much for joining. Welcome. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thank you, Templeton. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Awesome. MJ, it's really good to have you here. And I look up to you for different resources as you continue to advocate for the deaf community, but also continue to educate us at Teamwork Cooperative on different ways. And so we appreciate you and your awareness and all the great things that you offer to us at Teamwork. We have the amazing Frank O'Sullivan. I think I'm pronouncing that name correctly. Thank you so much, Frank. Frank is the executive director of the Deaf and Hard Hearing organization here in Nova Scotia, and we're so delighted to have Frank here with us. Frank, welcome. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be involved. I'm not often called amazing, so it's nice to have that as an option.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, it's always good to have amazing people. I see everyone as amazing people, and I think that's just a bit of my personality as well. So yes. Well, thank you so much, both MJ and Frank, for coming on to the conversation. We have some important things to talk about today, and that's something that more so is in advocacy with the deaf and hard of hearing community, but also learning about how to communicate with the community, but also understanding your point of view from a personal perspective. But first, I would love to ask both of you the most interview question that we always ask in an interview. Tell us about yourself and the work you are doing in a few sentences. Tell us about yourself. Yeah. MJ, you can go ahead first, and then I'll allow Frank to go.
Okay. Well, Templeton, as you said, I work here at Teamwork, and I hail from New Brunswick originally, and I moved to Halifax about 30 years ago to go to St. Mary's University. After graduating, I decided to stay in Halifax, and I've worked in a variety of positions. I worked as a residential counselor, a job coach, a teaching assistant, and currently I am a case manager here at Teamwork, and that's been for the past 12 years. I grew up going to a mainstream school for my time in public school without an interpreter. So I didn't get an interpreter until university. And currently I live in Dartmouth with my husband, two teenage, well, one almost adult children, and my cat. And that's
Awesome.
it for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, MJ, for sharing that. And it's always good to see different ways of how people start out their career life and talking about the educational system and starting from there and then going into employment in different areas. And so that's really fascinating for sure. Coming from the family of educators and then coming into employment myself. So it's really good to hear that. Thank you so much, MJ. Frank, tell us about yourself and the work you are doing. Yes.
I work for the Society of Deaf and Hard of Hearing Nova Scotians as the executive director. It's been since the year 2000, so it's about 22 years now. And I grew up in a very small town in Western Ireland. And it was a town of about 900 people. I went to a boarding school for the deaf, for deaf boys there in Ireland. And that was specifically in Dublin. And then after high school, I studied commercial horticulture. So I did that following high school. I took a course. And then shortly after graduating, I graduated college and then moved to Canada.
Awesome. Wow.
I learned very quickly that Ireland Sign Language and Canadian Sign Language was very different. So I had to learn Canadian Sign Language upon arrival. And then I've worked in the horticultural industry for a while and realized that I was interested in social services. I was very interested in working with deaf and hard of hearing individuals. So I went to the University of Toronto at that point. And following graduation, I worked as a career development specialist, counselor, teacher, a coordinator of seniors programs, a number of jobs, a community support worker, and now I'm an executive director. I live in Halifax with my wife, Nancy, who is originally from Halifax, and I have 3 sons.
Wow. Nice.
And 2 dogs, a golden retriever and a Bernese mountain dog.
Oh, that's so cool. That is so awesome.
And that's my life.
Ooh, that is really awesome. MJ with the cat, you with the 2 dogs. That's really good with the animal kingdom, I call it. It's really good, really good for sure. Um, it's really good to know that both of you have extensive knowledge of information that you bring to the table, and by your educational background and experiences, we're having this conversation on advocacy today, to learn more about the deaf and hard of hearing community. So my first opening question, and I'm gonna allow you, Frank, to start us off with this question, and then MJ will respond. What is the difference between a person who is deaf or hard of hearing? That I think that's a good question to start off. Yeah, yeah.
Well, there is a lot of overlap. It depends on the concept of being culturally deaf. So there would be this concept of capital D deaf versus lowercase d deaf. And for deaf people who are capital D deaf, it's individuals that are in the community using sign language with other deaf individuals. So they have their own community, their own distinct cultural and linguistic community. They're socializing with other deaf people. There are sports clubs. There are a variety of clubs that are specific to the deaf community. There would even be religious or spiritual services for deaf individuals. So it's a distinct group that's using sign language.
Wow.
And often, because of that experience, this group of people have come together, signing together, so they remain friends for long periods of time. And in Halifax, there is a very large capital D deaf community because of the Halifax School for the Deaf that was on Gottingen Street. So people would have started school and then continue to remain friends with these individuals for years and years after the fact because of that experience in school. Also locally, there's Maritime Sign Language and American Sign Language. So Maritime Sign Language was influenced by British Sign Language. And for hard of hearing individuals, there are individuals that may use sign language but may not. They may depend on their residual hearing for communication. They may use hearing aids They could speech read. So it depends. There are differences between those two groups, but they overlap as well.
Wow, that's really good, and that's really good to hear for sure. Especially when you're connecting from a community approach, and in the community, like you say, they stay together. They're friends after joining a program or being in education together. That's really unique, and that's what community is all about. Being with each other, learning with each other, connecting with each other, supporting each other. That's really important as well. And saying that, hey, I got your back basically is what they're saying, and I will advocate for you, which is really good. That's really awesome. MJ, what do you have to say on this question? Do you have any add-ons to say? Yeah.
Sure. I would add that for hard of hearing individuals, sometimes there are those that, with hearing and deaf individuals, there are two separate, distinct groups. And sometimes for hard of hearing individuals, they may be able to talk on the phone, for example, but they also may be able to sign. So
Mhm.
they often end up between those two groups, whether deaf or hearing. Some hard of hearing individuals don't have any sign language. So they're learning how to speech read and use the residual hearing that they do have. So there are different groups even within the hard of hearing category. So it is dependent on the individual.
Yeah.
My husband is hard of hearing, and he can mix with the deaf community and the hearing community, right? So he has that ability to be a part of both because of his experience of being able to hear some and sign.
Oh wow, that's really amazing. And thank you so much for sharing that. That's something that I didn't know, and I think that will educate me on that for sure. As I move more into advocacy, what does advocacy looks like for the deaf and hard hearing community? Do you feel that there's advocacy being done in the community? Do you feel supported in the community? I think that all brings into some of the questions of where I'm trying to move this forward. I'll allow MJ to go for first, and then Frank, I would like to hear your perspective on that. Yeah.
Sure. In terms of advocacy, I think it's whether it's an individual or group,
Mhm,
it's dependent on the topic and what people are advocating for.
mhm,
It's really important for individuals to know their rights and make sure that they have the equal access that's available to them.
mhm,
Advocacy is important for policies and structural change because it is important that that advocacy is effective. Otherwise, people will have to continue fighting. Some individuals may have a hard time with the advocacy role, whereas a group may be more effective. The video relay service is an example for us of something that the deaf community advocated for. And video relay service is where people can use the phone via video and call people, hearing people, and there be interpreters on the line. It's a relay operator of sorts, so
mhm.
that call center experience. And that allows for more effective communication. And that wouldn't have happened without the group coming together and advocating for that.
Wow. Frank.
Frank, would you like to add more there? MJ, you took care of most of what I would add in, but it's really important that we consider change and the effectiveness of change, right? For the deaf
Yeah.
community, people are often isolated, and
Mhm.
we have to be dependent on ourselves
Right.
to advocate for our needs. There are
Yeah.
language barriers there, and we have to find ways of breaking down those barriers. So it is important to build that connection So there's not only the local advocacy and accessibility, but we also want to look at individuals across Canada, right, at a national level, and ensure that the advocacy is there for everyone involved. And MJ saying, if I could just add one more
Yeah, go
additional.
ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
For deaf individuals, sometimes there is that challenge with the language barriers as well. I think that's an important piece that we need to consider. Misunderstandings can easily occur because either written English or verbally spoken English can be misunderstood. And then it takes time to resolve those issues because of the miscommunications. With more awareness and an ability to change the system and provide more accessibility and equal access in the community, you will continue to see effective communication and accessibility.
I look forward to my family's security in the future. That's the main goal as a father.
The empowerment from changing careers has really just made me want to get out of bed in the morning.
I'm looking forward to growing my business. So I want to hire people like I was hired. I want to give guys that chance.
Il me fera plaisir de continuer à travailler avec les immigrants francophones en Nouvelle-Écosse.
I am looking forward to the financial freedom that I never had before.
Wow. That's really important for sure to share, and I thank both of you for sharing that. And I totally agree. There's more that we can do and change. Is key. Of accepting, but also working with different groups such as the deaf and hard hearing community and understanding. If you're not willing to be open minded, I think that that's also what advocacy requires you to be open and wanting to learn and be willing to learn as well as you go about learning about different areas of groups and stuff like that. So that's thank you so much for sharing that. um, my next question goes on, and this is another way of advocacy as well, but what is the best way to communicate with a person who is deaf if I don't know the sign or language? Like, what's the best way? And of course, I know MJ, you have taught us a bit of different sign languages, and I know that's really good. But what if someone else doesn't know how to do sign language? Like, how do you communicate? Yeah, I will let Frank answer the question, and then I'll go to MJ.
Well, I think right now it's a good example. You're communicating with us. You don't know sign language, but we have effective communication by using an interpreter, right?
Yes, yeah. Interpreter is really good.
So there's not an answer for everything. Everyone's going to be a little bit different and approach communication differently. But if there are meetings or workshops, that sort of thing, an interview, having an interpreter is an effective way of communicating.
Right.
There's also note taking and captioning. So for hard of hearing individuals, they would want captioning and be able to read that captioning. If you're informally meeting someone and there aren't those options, then speech reading is an option. Speaking slowly. Repeating if someone doesn't understand the first time. And being willing to rephrase something if the first time it's not understood, right? To give that second chance at understanding. And then if there is a possibility of using a visual cue, for example, that would be something to consider. So at Sobeys recently, someone asked me, the cashier was asking me if I had my Air Miles card, and I wasn't understanding, and they showed me a picture of the Air Miles card, visual cue, and then I was able to take it from there. So just being able to look for different options, be flexible with the communication. Note taking, right? Paper and pen is an option, but getting louder does not help.
No, definitely not. That's just kind of disrespectful. Yeah.
And if I could, Frank saying, I'd like to add one more thing.
Go ahead.
There's a lot of great technology. Personally, I found my quality of life has improved with voice to text options.
Oh, nice.
So I use my phone, use an app, and it will take someone's voice and put it into text. Some are free, some are very cost effective. And that's an option as well. And that improves communication. And I would say, it's really improved in the last couple of years too. But when we first started using these applications, it would have been, 30% of the information was understood. But now it's about 90% is shared via that voice to text. Now, it's
Wow.
not as good as a human being.
That's amazing.
Right? Human beings are able to block out the background noise, that sort of thing. Voice to text applications are not, so that causes extra confusion there, but it's an option.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really good. Thank you so much for sharing that. And yes, totally. We're doing it right now with an interpreter, and we at Teamwork Cooperative, we always have interpreters here throughout our sessions in order for them to be accommodating, and accommodation is key as well. And we thank the interpreter also for being here to work through us in this process as well for this interview. So MJ, I'll see if you have anything to add on in regards to this part. Yeah.
Sure, I would love to. Lip reading is an option there, but it can sometimes cause some missed information because of certain letters sounding the same or looking the same. So M and P are two examples of those. If you're trying to read that on someone's lips, it's difficult to understand. So that can cause additional communication difficulties. So it's important to be able to get that clarification when needed. But lip reading is certainly not providing a lot of information. The tendency is about 40 to 50% of what's being said is understood statistically. So that's an option for communication, but there are other ways as well. Also, during COVID, masks have made it difficult, right? Masks have certainly been a barrier for us, or the plexiglass screens as well. There's been a lot of additional challenges there because you're not able to hear the person or see the person in the same way. So those changes then affect our ability to communicate. And like Frank said, the voice to text applications do help, or writing back and forth, paper and pen method does help. And then, of course, it's great to have an interpreter when we can.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, MJ, for explaining that for sure. Now I'm learning different ways of how I can communicate with a deaf individual. You talked about reading lips, MJ, just now. Can all deaf people read lips? Is my question.
No. No. It depends on everybody's individual experience, right? So some people are only using sign language, where other deaf people have learned how to lip read or learned how to talk. So it is very individualized.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Do you have anything to add on, Frank, with that question?
I'm a terrible lip reader. I misunderstand things all of the time. So often my response doesn't match the question asked. It adds some awkward aspects to life, but that is what it is.
Yeah.
So it's really important to also, I guess, state that it's exhausting as well, right? To watch someone's lips and try to understand, that is very tiring, and it does require work to understand someone.
Yeah.
MJ's just adding, especially during COVID, when all of a sudden now we're on different online applications like Zoom, and you're trying to watch someone in small boxes, right? So there are the technologies available that offer captioning and offer additional methods of communication. So that's been nice. It's helped reduce that barrier, which is a nice addition. So there are pros and cons.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I can feel you in that, Frank, for sure. It may feel difficult to hear or not hear, but I try to read the lips of another individual, because sometimes it may be hard, especially, and that's why I try when I talk to MJ, I try to directly look at her, and try to make sure I'm speaking clearly, and try my best. And I think it's been working. I know that we've had clear communication with each other, and so yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you are right. It's been great so far.
Awesome.
And sometimes with a new person, it's just taking the time, right?
Yeah,
And over time, you get used to that person and then it's fine. It's easy to communicate.
definitely, definitely. We both of you spoke about having interpreters. What is it like to have your words translated by an interpreter? Do you feel confident? Do you feel that it's really interpreted well, independently as well? Like, how do you feel about that? Yeah, I will start with Frank on that question, and then go to MJ.
Interpreters are going through college level courses and then they're doing on the job training and professional development. So all of that improves their skill and ability.
Hmm.
So I do have a high level of trust in the interpreter as they interpret for me.
Hmm.
I am responsible as well if I'm doing a presentation or providing a workshop that I provide background information and preparatory materials for the interpreter so they know what's happening and they have context. But I do feel confident that what I sign and then what is said is said properly, and often I can tell by the answer I receive in return.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Thank you so much for sharing that, Frank. MJ, what about yourself?
I feel the same as Frank. Also, I would say, again, growing up, I didn't have an interpreter. So my first year university was my first time using an interpreter, and it took some learning,
Mhm.
and I've since gotten used to it, of course. Sometimes, I can talk, but someone doesn't always understand what I say when I talk, or there can be misunderstandings.
Right.
So having an interpreter there provides clarity in the conversation and ensures that what I have to say is understood. It also gives me an opportunity to share my thoughts and ideas, and I feel more included.
Yes,
At a
yes.
staff meeting, for example, if I want to share my thoughts and ideas, doing that without an interpreter would be much more difficult.
Yeah.
And how would I get the information from everyone in the room if I didn't have an interpreter? So that that is an important part
Right.
of the experience, right? To ensure that that communication is effective,
Yeah.
because it lets me know what's happening, and
Right.
you.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And also for events, going to an event and knowing that the interpreter is there, I'm able to participate in a different way. If
Mhm.
I'm going to a show, for example, and a theater experience, that sort of thing, having an interpreter is great because I can be included, or having an interpreter with me makes a difference.
Wow. That you're so true, and I interpreters, they're like another superheroes. They bring their own unique education of way of learning, and I appreciate them as well for having this type of service, also having this type of education. That's way of life for sure, for all deaf and hard of hearing persons, and it's really really awesome. Just really awesome. My last question is all about music. I'm always curious. I love music. I love to listen to music, every sort of music, from reggae to pop to Caribbean to soca, every types of music. So my last question is, how do the deaf community listen to music? Like, is there like sign language for music, or is it just like the subtitles when playing the music? Like, how do they feel the beat of the music? Yeah, I will go to MJ first, and then go to Frank.
Well, it's a really interesting question.
Yeah, yeah.
Deaf and hard of hearing people have their own personal preference in terms of listening to music. I think there are people that do listen to music and are interested in that, and then others that have no interest in listening to music.
Mm-hmm.
For profoundly deaf individuals, they're not able to hear the music, right? So that would be a different experience, but they may feel the beat,
Mm-hmm.
right? The rhythm.
Yeah.
So if they're close to the speakers or the volume is turned up, they're able to feel that, feel those vibrations.
Nice.
Other people will watch the lyrics, watch the captions to read the music. There are experiences where interpreters interpret the music, or deaf people will sign the music.
That's nice. That's really
So there are various options. For me, I would say that I like the beat of drums because I can feel the beat,
Yeah.
right? I feel that vibration. It's nice to, when I can see music in sign language as well, because it provides a visual representation of the music.
Yeah, that's really awesome. That's really good, unique ways to share. Thank you so much, MJ, for sharing that for sure. Frank, um, take us off with this last question. What do you think?
I really do agree with MJ because everybody's going to have a different answer, right? Hard of
Yeah.
hearing people are going to have a different answer than a deaf person. Some people like it, some people don't. Some people can hear it, some people can't. Age, experience, family life, did the family listen to music growing up? All of that affects whether or not a person's really enjoying music. I think there are some deaf people that sign music, and that is enjoyable. Now with technology, for hard of hearing individuals, they would have Bluetooth, and I think that may improve the quality, the audio quality and the sound in hearing that music. So that may provide a different way of connecting with the music through hard of hearing or hearing aids and Bluetooth. So some people may enjoy, when they can't actually hear it, they may enjoy the rhythm or the beat. But again, it's a very individual experience.
Yeah, totally agree. Looking at different unique ways and, like you say, different experience, different heartbeat, if I would call it, for someone to connect with the music that they love. Um, wow, this has been really amazing. I really appreciate both you, Frank and MJ, for coming on to today's podcast. We've learned so much today. It brought so much education and awareness that we could talk about how to advocate. Now we can talk about how to different ways of sign language and how to communicate. Talking about the interpreters and how they ways of accommodation, and then bringing it to a close with some smooth music of ways of passion because of how to connect in those different ways. And so I really do appreciate both of you for coming on to today's neighborhood conversation. We have been in your neighborhood, and we hope that you express and you share these thoughts in your neighborhood with other people. And we here at Teamwork Cooperative, we are here to welcome you if you would like to learn more about these resources that we offer. And we appreciate you listening on today's podcast, and we'll see you at the next one. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Templeton.